Thank you for joining us. Welcome to the Board Development Lab, Reimagining Governance for Equity, Sustainability, and Impact. So I'm Dr. Alejandra Cunha. I'm the Executive Director of CSUN's Valley Nonprofit Resources, and I'm honored to be leading and co-creating this program alongside Kiana Montezeri from Cedars-Sinai and Rebecca Chavez-Hauk of Aspira Public Affairs. So together, we're excited to create and introduce a space for you nonprofit leaders to reimagine board governance in a way that's equitable, resilient, trauma-informed, and aligned with your mission. I'm going to invite Kiana to lead us in this discussion about what is the Board Development Lab.
Hi, everyone. Thank you again to those of you that joined. We know that undertaking board development is a really, really big endeavor, but it's necessary. We started working on this project. It's been a number of months that we've been sort of working in the background full tilt, and it's been percolating for a couple of years now, sort of generated from a need that we're seeing among our nonprofit partners. Some of you are going through periods of like hugely expansive growths, and we're noticing that maybe your boards aren't necessarily adapted yet to meeting the moment where you are right now, and we'd like to help you get there. The other thing we wanted to do, we mentioned trauma-informed and inclusive practices. Though the world is different than it was a year ago, we think that the work continues, and what that means is making sure that we can, as much as possible, continue to support our nonprofits in developing organizations that center equity from the top down, and board development and from the board is the definition of really starting from the top. We envision future boards that are serving you to be as diverse as like must meet your needs. And what we want is for there to be a way for you to really integrate people who might have really valuable voices into your leadership, but who may not be integratable under sort of the model of board leadership that we're working with right now. We really tried to co-create a program that integrates all of those things. There's a little bit of in-person time, and then there's going to be a lot of sort of out of togetherness time for you to be able to do that, where you can sort of integrate the sustainability, the impact that you need with the trauma-informed and the equity practices that we think continue to be the future. One of the ways that we're doing that, I mentioned the word co-creating. We chose the word lab pretty deliberately. We want it to feel like a place where you are co-creating together. What that means, in addition to the fact that you're going to be together sharing probably some really vulnerable information about your organizations together in the lab, is that once we have the number of organizations that we're going to have in the cohort starting August, we're also going to be reaching out to you between August and the start date in October to do some pre-work, to get some input on what's going to best meet your needs once the cohort is formed, and help tailor the curriculum to that as well.
I think the only thing I would add is I know a couple of organizations have already applied, and we thank you for the clarity and depth with which you're addressing what your needs are and what you hope to gain from this experience. For those of you who may have not already applied or are considering application, really dig deep in terms of and be honest with yourself and be vulnerable about what your needs are, because we want this to be the most optimally helpful thing for you. So be clear, be in depth, be vulnerable, where everybody's kind of it's where I'm seeing some similarities in need. So I always like to say you're not alone. If you're thinking there's something that you want to work on, I'm sure that there's another member of the cohort that wants to explore and figure out what that could look like for their organization too. So the co-creation of this is going to be something that's very strong about this lab opportunity. I'm going to address this piece through the lens of my own experience as a board member. I've served as a nonprofit executive for 30 years, so I've got that role as having to be the operations and administrative piece of a nonprofit organization, but I've also served as a board member and the board development officer, governance chair for a number of other organizations. So I'm going to look at this through the lens of a board member. As we know, a number of you have talked about, or some people are posing this transition that they may be undergoing as an organization from having working boards that were hands-on, working hand in hand with the executive and staff doing the work of a nonprofit, And now you're starting to shift or trying to explore what it looks like, shifting in your board and having them think through the lens of governance and as their role as fiduciaries and supporters of your organization. Reimagining what the three major duties of a fiduciary board are. So the three duties are duty of care, and that is resourcing and supporting the executive director, and by association, the entire staff and clientele. You know, the duty of care, you as board members are people that are there first and foremost to see that this organization thrives and succeeds. The duty of loyalty, which means you're not in it for yourself, you're in it as one of a group of individuals, the governing board, that is there to be committed and loyal to the organization. We're operating in the best interest of that organization's mission, purpose, values, and vision. So that's the duty of loyalty. That part of that is part and parcel of that is, disclosing those conflicts, being very appropriate. How do you navigate conflicts as board members? And then the third duty is duty of obedience, which is you make sure that that organization is complying with all required laws, regulations within the state of California and elsewhere. But the buck stops with you as a fiduciary, a member of that board. So you want to make sure that that duty of obedience is there. So those are the three duties in consideration of these four program pillars, which are impact, cohesion, sustainability, and innovation. Cohesion, making sure everybody's on the same page, improving the ED and board relationships and communication. And it's two-way communication. Sometimes I've seen boards where there's an excellent relationship between the board chair and the executive director. But then sometimes that isn't cascaded out. The information is not cascaded out to the rest of the board. So the board and the executive director are doing great work as partners, but the rest of the board, I like to say, has been left at the ticket window while the board chair and the executive director and the train taking it off in a new direction. So making sure that there is cohesion between the executive director and the board, primarily with the chair and other officers, but also with the board as a whole. Sustainability, especially with boards that are making a transition. Maybe they're looking at merging with another organization, or they're trying to move from a working board to a board that is more governing and more fiduciary. Making sure you have functional and productive committees, again, going back to that impact, that each board member knows what their purpose and their role is within it, what their functionality is. So important to all of this are just the structures of how you do the board. As the way I look at it, board recruitment, board structure, board self-evaluation. How do you grow yourself? What are you looking at? If you've got a vision for an organization and you see the strategy of 3 to 5 to 10 years out of what that organization is going to be, what does that board look like that makes that happen? Are you pipelining leadership? Are you cultivating emerging leaders of people that are on your board or even in committees who could then be onboarded as board members? Really looking ahead of what that pipeline looks like and having a clear understanding of the different assets and strengths that each individual board member brings to the board. And then also tied to strategy is the concept of innovation, or the pillar of innovation. And there's going to be so many wonderful things that you're going to explore related to trauma and equity informed governance here. But how do you do the governing work of the board? By incorporating individual strengths and assets that people bring to, again, support the CEO and the organization, and thinking about the box, out of the box all the time. What can we do differently? Are we stuck in old modalities and old formats of this is the way it's always been done? Well, there are certain things that have to be done, those three duties of care of a governing board, but they can be done in different ways, and exploring about what that could look like for your organization. Again, thinking about impact, how cohesive you are, how do you sustain yourself in the organization, and how you can innovate.
2 people from each organization are required: the executive director or CEO and the board chair. There's an optional third person that you get to decide to invite. And that could be an emerging leader. It could be someone who's very influential on your board and you want their buy-in, whatever that looks like for your team. But the third person is optional, not required. So ideal participants, as a couple of you have already mentioned, which is really exciting to hear, is that nonprofits with any recent or expected leadership transitions on their staff or board are certainly invited. This could be the right moment for talking things out with each other, getting ideas from others, undergoing or implementing strategic planning or strategic realignment. So major like inflection points, transition points, major changes where you really feel like you need to get buy-in, communication, support. And so if any of these things make sense, then as we said, you're in the right room. But I'm curious if Kiana or Rebecca, you have other things to add, and also if you have any questions or comments about this particular point.
We've talked about on this call that transition from working to governance board, and one of the reasons why we've mentioned that is just because it's been reflected in some of the applications we've seen so far. But we don't want it to be exclusive to that. So when we say ideal participants, first and foremost, this is a pilot and a lab. So if you're considering applying, we would want you to err on the side of throw in your application rather than self-select out, because it provides us with information about what needs are and how to best meet the needs of our nonprofits. But the second thing is that we don't want our nonprofits to think that getting your house in order is only appropriate at certain times in your life cycle. So while we've identified that it might be that there's an executive transition or a board transition, we also understand that sometimes doing this board recruitment or doing the strategic planning is just necessary even when things have been plugging along for a while. So if you think that there is a need, if you have board recruitment needs, if you feel like maybe this is the right time for a program to help your board and your functioning nonprofit entity better align and really be in better alignment so that the work can be done, especially at this particular junction in time with so many nonprofits feeling threatened by the loss of federal and state funding, we really encourage you to apply. That said, I should add something else. We haven't mentioned the cohort size. We are planning to keep it pretty small. We are inviting, it will be 5 organizations to participate. So when we say lab, we do know that we want to keep it intimate. We want to keep a really safe space for the board chairs and the EDs coming in and sort of sharing intricacies of their nonprofits.
That leads to the visual. So what's it going to look like meeting? What can you expect? We really are aiming for this to be interactive, where we're learning from expert speakers, we're learning from each other. If you're willing to put your own scenarios and situations out there, we can learn from each other. Or we can bring in case studies. So it's that third person. We're all weighing in on stuff that we can relate to, but not bringing our own case scenario to the group. We'll have practical application exercises and lots of discussion. It's really meant to be hands-on, and it's really meant to be helpful to you and the process and the moment that you're in. So session 1, which begins in October, will focus on impact, so governance fundamentals and strategic leadership, and we'll focus on roles and responsibilities of EDs and boards. And Rebecca's example of duties was beautifully articulated. We'll be talking about aligning board governance with organizational mission and values. So that's session 1. And reminder, each session is 3 hours. So we really have time to talk about specifics. And ideally, we want to talk about your specifics. But again, understanding that you can share or not share whatever you're comfortable with. And how do we be vulnerable and also be confidential and protect each organization's privacy. Session 2 will focus on cohesion, equity-centered leadership, and relationship building. So this is where we'll be addressing implicit bias. And I realize that talking about implicit bias can make us feel really uncomfortable. And I just want you to know that where we're coming from is that we've all been good students of our families and our cultures and our society. And this is not a gotcha moment. And this is not a moment for anybody to feel on the spot, but this is really a moment for self-awareness and self-reflection and how we can do things differently than what we've been taught or raised or are used to doing, and truly foster inclusive board decision-making. As a former school social worker and former professor of social work, my understanding of the antidote to trauma is rest, relaxation, sense of belonging, and joy, community. And so we really want to intentionally, purposefully integrate those into every session. So every session will include an inclusive activity, icebreaker, getting to know each other, relaxation activity, as well as guest speakers, as well as our own learning from each other as a community, as a developing community. Session 3 is about sustainability. So we'll talk about long-term planning and financial oversight. Session 4, innovation, trauma-informed and adaptive governance. And as you can see, sessions 1, 2, 3, and 4, they all fall in line with the 4 pillars that Rebecca outlined and described so beautifully in an earlier slide. And session 5, which you'll see in the timeline, is really our capstone and peer learning opportunity. So this is where you take all the discussions, all the ideas, everything we've talked about, and present, not just create, but present your own governance action plan, what you hope to change, modify, improve. And just so you know, we intentionally included 2 Saturdays in this 5 series lab because we were hoping to accommodate your board members who may be working and so may not be able to get away on a Friday morning. So if you're wondering why is there a Friday, Saturday option, it's actually we're trying to accommodate, diverse schedules. So we'll start Friday, followed a couple weeks later, Saturday, October 18th. So we have 2 in October, 1 in November, 1 in December, and then Friday, January is our 5th session where we have the capstone presentation.
We really wanted to give exactly what you were talking about, all the board chairs and the EDs time to sort of hold their schedule. So we wanted to give the schedule out several months in advance.
So follow-up funding is available, and I'm going to hand it over to Kiana to talk more about that.
We really wanted you to be able to implement the plan that you were going to create and do the work after you participate in this program. We know that things like board retreats and strategic planning can get expensive, and we wanted to offer up to $30,000 in follow-up funding from Cedars in order for you to actually do the work that you envision and articulate as part of the program.
For my part, the idea really is for us to have truly practical working sessions where you are thinking through, communicating, problem solving, troubleshooting, where you have time in between our sessions to talk to the rest of the board, so that when we come to week 5, you're really presenting something that you feel is really realistic, doable, like ready to go, and not, come week 5, oh shoot, what are we going to propose to Cedars for 30,000? No, it's very much, we've done the legwork, we've done the planning, we've got the buy-in, and now we're ready to take action, truly, because everybody gets what we're doing, why we're doing it, how, and now we just need that extra support to make it happen. Application dates. So the application is open, and I want to thank those of you who have already jumped in and completed it. If there's anything you want to change or modify, feel free. We have until July 16th when we close the application, and you have the link in the email, and you can expect to hear back about your acceptance beginning the first week of August. And if you have any questions between now and then, feel free to reach out to me directly.
Alejandra is going to be your primary point person for follow-up questions about the application, although I'm totally here if you have other questions as well, if you want to email both of us. But I would say go to her. It has been really co-created. We can't say enough though about Alejandra's vision. And so we would really want to hear it from you, want to hear it from her.
Well, thank you again to everyone who participated here today. This is really exciting. I'm really looking forward to joining with you on Friday mornings or Saturday mornings, and really looking deeply and honestly and creatively, whatever moment, whatever transition you're going through, and how we can put our heads together and really come up with solutions, ideas, policies, practices that can really serve you, your organizations, your communities, and just thank you for all of it.